The book I chose was 1984 by George Orwell. 1984 tells the story of Winston Smith, who lives in Oceania, a dystopian society where all are watched under the eye of Big Brother, all day, every day, whenever there is visible light. Winston works under the Ministry of Truth. He often journals his deepest feelings and complaints within the oppressive government he lives under while the cameras aren't watching him. At work, he falls in love with a girl named Julia and hopes she isn't part of the thought police, whom are everywhere in society, helping aid Big Brother in watching people. Through Winston's diary and pursuance of love with Julia, he is acting in defiance against his oppressive society. But will he succeed in avoiding Big Brother's gaze? The passage that I chose is from the very beginning of the book, when Winston begins to write in a diary. And this shows a lot about who he is as a character, because it's showing how he is willing to act in direct defiance of his society, of his government, even though he believes that the repercussions could be really strong. So I'm going to read that. From the table drawer, he took out a pen holder, a bottle of ink, and a thick quarto-sized blank book with a red back and a marbled cover. For some reason, the telescreen in the living room was in an unusual position. Instead of being placed, as was normal, in the end of the wall where it could command the whole room, it was in a longer wall, opposite the window. To one side of it there was a shallow alcove in which Winston was now sitting, and which, when the flats were built, had probably been intended to hold bookshelves. By sitting in the alcove and keeping well back, Winston was able to remain outside of the range of the telescreen, so far as sight went. He could be heard, of course, but so long as he stayed in his present position, he could not be seen. It was partly the unusual geography of the room that had suggested to him the thing that he was now about to do. But it had also been suggested by the book he had just taken out of the drawer. It was a peculiarly beautiful book. Its smooth, creamy paper, a little yellowed by age, was a kind that had not been manufactured for at least 20 years past. For at least 40 years past. He could guess, however, that the book was much older than that. He had seen it lying in the window of a frowsy little junk shop in a slummy quarter of town, just what quarter he did not now remember, and had been stricken immediately by an overwhelming desire to possess it. Party members were supposed to not go into ordinary shops, dealing on the free market it was called, but the rule was not strictly kept because there were various things, such as shoelaces and razor blades, which it was impossible to get a hold of in any other way. He had given a quick glance up and down the street, and then had slipped inside and bought the book for $2.50. At the time, he was not conscious of wanting it for any particular purpose. He had carried it guiltily home in his briefcase. Even with nothing written in it, it was compromising possession. The thing he was about to do was to open a diary. This was not illegal. Nothing was illegal, since there were no longer any laws. But if detected, it was reasonably certain that he would be punished by death, or at least by 20 years in forced labor camp. I think that this passage truly captures Winston, because it's showing not only his acts of defiance against society, but how risky he really is willing to be in order to maintain his individuality in such an oppressive and harsh regime. I would definitely recommend this book for the teenage, young adult audience, because I think that there are 3 vital things that it offers. First, it relates to society now, and especially in the political climate that we're in. It relates to issues that are really big, such as current protests and its consequences, relating to police brutality, even in a lawless and free country, lawless in Oceania and a free country here in America with freedom of the press, as well as things like xenophobia, hatred of the foreigners, people who are unlike us, that is also tackled in 1984. Another thing that it relates to that is also really important in millennials' lives right now, especially in the changing job markets and the involvement of AI in the future, during our adulthood probably, it tackles what effects that technology already has. It can make you think about that, and also what effects can technology and its advancement have on the future and on our privacy and all things like that. Another reason why I think that it's important to read this book, or I think it's a good idea to read this book, is because it makes you think, and it has a lot of political philosophy that otherwise would be really boring to learn about, like in history class. But it allows you to understand the United States more and political philosophies that are happening now. Even though this political philosophy is very different, it kind of brings some sort of like understanding to political philosophies that are happening now, and you can read it in a really interesting book instead of having to like do a bunch of research on it. So that's why I think that 1984 is a really good choice to read for young adults.